Hey, I'm Dylan. I'm Scott's son, also known as Jack Dillard in the Joe Dillard series.
Hi, I'm Kody. I'm Scott Pratt's daughter. And I would be Lily, but there are some... She is me and she is not.
And I'm Jess. I'm not related, totally normal person, and I'm reading these books for the very first time. This is Scott Pratt versus Joe Dillard, the podcast, a behind-the-scenes look at the best-selling Joe Dillard series. All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Scott Pratt versus Joe Dillard podcast, where we are reviewing or going through the first part of part 2. So part 2A, is that what we're calling it?
Part 2A.
Because part 2 is the longest part of the book. Dylan, why is that?
Generally speaking, Dad really was a big fan of Joseph Campbell's kind of the hero's journey, and there are a lot of other kind of schools of thought too, but it's basically the 3-act structure. The first act is pretty short, where the hero there's a call to action and the hero crosses a threshold. And then Act 2 ends up being the bulk of the story. It's where all the meat is on the bone, per se, and it kind of cultivates in the climax right at the end of Act 2. Or it could be kind of at the beginning of Act 3. But anyway, yeah, that's the way Dad always structured his novels. So anytime you're reading a Dillard book, Act 2 is going to be pretty meaty.
Yeah, and so for that reason, we're not going to try and digest all of Act 2 in one sitting. Part 2
It'll be quite long.
Yes, so we're going to split part 2 into 2 parts. And to your point, Dylan, Act 2 is kind of where, for lack of a better term, shit hits the fan. We start off part 2 in chapter 13, April 26, 505. Like, Joe is on cloud 9.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he does not end on cloud 9. So, and we'll get to how
no, he doesn't.
How he goes from here all the way down to here in the span of, what, 100 pages?
Part 2A.
Yeah, in part 2A.
Yeah.
So in the middle of part 2, he's gone from the highest of highs to pretty much pretty low. And so let's talk through how that happens. You know, how does Joe go from being on cloud 9 to being down in the dumps? In the first chapter of this section, he gets the $250,000 in cash from Erlene.
Yes.
So if you remember, we left off part 1. He took the case with Angel Christian, and so now he's collecting his money for taking this case. It's $250,000. This is huge for him. And
in a duffel bag.
In a duffel bag.
In a duffel bag.
And this is a big moment for Joe Dillard, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because does he say in the book this is the most he's ever made on a case?
I don't know if it comes right out and says it, but it alludes very heavily. I mean, it's like...
It definitely alludes to that heavily.
Well, and I've got
Yeah.
quite a few things in here, kind of little parts in this chapter that like pertain to their real life. But one thing is like when Caroline is asking him out on the deck, like he makes her guess how much, and her beginning was like, no way, 50. And he's like,
Right.
oh, come on. She's like, 60? 70? He's like, oh, you're almost like halfway, almost-ish.
Yeah.
And so you can tell there's no way they've ever...
Yeah, it's a good indication of what she's thinking.
Close,
what the ballpark is, exactly.
And I remember from when Dad was a lawyer, like, I think the most he probably... That I remember, Dylan, you might remember this better, but he maybe got like $50,000 all at once. And
I don't think he ever got that much.
you don't think... I thought it was with...
The wrongful death case where there was a horse riding down the road in the middle of the night that had escaped and rode it like it actually was a really terrible situation.
That's not the horse I ended up owning, is it?
No,
That wasn't Domino, because that came from one of his
No.
cases.
This was a totally awful, terrible situation. There was a horse that had gotten out of its enclosure and I don't remember if it was in Washington County. I think it was in rural Washington County, but a horse had escaped its enclosure and was riding, or not ride. Obviously, horses don't ride; they run. It was running. Yeah, no, I was like, "There's a human on this horse." There isn't, but it was night. It was the middle of the night. You know, it was midnight, 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and a horse has absconded, and it's running as fast, like full bore, down the wrong. It's going the wrong way. You know, on a 2-lane highway in the country at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a car that comes that ends up coming down the road. And the horse hits the car head on, kills the driver, kills the horse. I mean, it was this really terrible, terrible, awful situation.
I don't know.
And Dad ended up getting hired by the family to represent them in a wrongful death case where they sued the people who had owned the horse.
Oh my gosh.
And which... Yeah, so that and I think that ended up being a thing, and that was probably like one of his biggest paydays per se as a lawyer. But yeah, that wasn't like
not $250.
You know,
not $250.
Also,
I gotta say,
no, nothing like that at
he
all.
Would get
And
random stuff for
it was just like any of
though.
this. Well, it's almost like in law in a lot of ways. Like when you talk about making a lot of money, specifically. You know, it's a lot of like wrongful death, medical malpractice, like stuff. I mean, it really is like profiteering off of the macabre. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like being a mortician or something. Like it's really,
yeah.
It's not like really there's a winner, but
right.
You just get hired and you just do the best you can. But
right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
think
he definitely never got that big of a payday. We would randomly end up like Dylan got a truck that was a drug dealer's truck
nice.
With massive rims that we had bullet holes fixed in. That was his high school car that had neon underneath it. He loved that truck. I love that truck too. That came through a case. I ended up with so I had 2 horses. Domino, the first horse I ended up with, some happened from an abuse case he had. Somebody was abusing the horse, and somehow we ended up with the horse. And we didn't have him for long. We were not the people he needed like a very safe environment with like a good trainer, and that was not me as a kid, but I loved him while we had him. But so like random stuff like that. I
gotta just tell you, Dylan, that I love that you use the word absconded. It needs to be used more.
Absconded.
It's a great word.
Horse
and nobody uses it. It's like triple word score. I love that word.
Yeah, that's. I have zero idea where that came from.
No, I love
honestly.
it. I'm all about it. I say more people should use that word.
It's a good word.
So that's a big chapter, right? So he gets to kind of, this is his, like, to your point, like he comes home and he's kind of like, you know, messing with Caroline. And this
which
is
he totally would have done. That was Mom was so mischievous that if Dad had an opportunity that he thought she'd get excited. He was always kind of like that, though. He like would try to make something out of a situation, like almost to the point where you'd be like, okay, what?
Just spit it out.
What's going on? Like I even wrote, like he counts it on the side of the road, which probably Dad would have $250,000 in cash in a duffel bag. He probably totally would have like counted every single bill. And then he stops on the way home to grab a bottle of champagne, which he 100% would have done. That was a big Dad thing.
100%.
Yeah.
Like any
Gotta
celebrate something.
Yeah.
If Dad brought home champagne, it was like
We're
you
celebrating.
knew something was, he liked to make a thing of stuff like that. So, yeah.
And I think you get like, it's kind of it's a fun little insight into their relationship, I think, in the book that kind of shows the playfulness and I think how excited he was to be able to provide that for her and the kids.
Dad loved, and he had the same thing with us. He loved to be able to do that, to make you excited. Like Christmas was his favorite. Like he would just, they couldn't stop. Like some of our Christmases were just ridiculous.
Like,
I got a
guys.
horse one Christmas. This was a different horse.
Oh my gosh. So many
Christmas morning,
horses.
and he just couldn't. He got me up at 4 a.m. because he just couldn't wait.
I'm sorry, I got to show you that I got
we
your
went
horse.
to the stable. Yeah.
Yeah. When do you hear of parents getting kids up
Yeah.
for
Never.
Christmas morning. You know what I mean?
Never.
But yeah, that's the way they were. And actually, that entire scene, that's definitely happened. You know, like they're obviously not those numbers, but I would 100% guarantee you at some point that exact exchange between the two of them occurred, where Dad had made I don't know, maybe $5,000 or whatever. But you know, you have to kind of understand where they were coming from. Dad was like grew up very lower class. You know, Mom was like maybe middle class a little bit, but didn't really understand what was going on. But Dad, he had really, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie A Knight's Tale, but the like kind of the Heath Ledger that, you know, you can change your stars sort of thing.
Right.
Dad had really changed his stars. You know what I mean? That's kind of what the whole thing with Law. That's what he was doing. He was changing his stars, and he was changing the stars
And
of our
ours.
family. So
Yeah.
and he and Mom both got really excited about that. So when he had things where like a lot of money was coming in, Mom was just like almost giddy with excitement.
We're
Because
big
we had never
celebrators.
dealt with that.
Yeah, I can
before,
see-
you
I
know?
sense
in
that.
general.
Yeah.
We're big celebrators.
That's okay. We are too. We always made a big deal of birthdays
Yeah.
and big things.
Anything, yeah. And I just, even in that scene, I put little things like Caroline asked about Rio peeing on his shoe when he came in. Our dog, our German Shepherd Rio, really did that a lot. He would get so excited when you get home that he would just start peeing.
Yeah.
So you had to like do the shuffle to try to make sure he didn't pee on your shoe. So that was a thing that actually happened a lot. And then I put Caroline's reaction to the money jumping around like a schoolgirl. It said would be Mom 100%. Just
Nice.
she would get very high pitch, and who even knows
Yeah.
what she would do, but that would have been so. Like he said, this was probably a real thing.
Yeah. This
Conversation.
is something he took from real
One
life.
thing that I did put that I thought was funny is that she said we have to spend a little, and then in parentheses he said in the book, "You're the miser, Caroline," and I put was not accurate for Mom. That's one of the little things that he like changed about. He made Caroline a little more like
Pragmatic.
practical, a little like the miser of the two.
Yeah.
And not Mom could be practical in that, like, Mom would stash cash and like hide it everywhere, like in her in these random places. But she was not a miser. She loved to spend money.
Oh my gosh. Have you seen?
Neither was he.
No, neither was
honestly.
he. He tried,
Right.
but they took great joy in spending money.
And spending
And,
money. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it made me giggle. That line, "You're the miser." I was like, nope.
That's not accurate.
Wishful.
False. That's a
Wishful
false
thinking.
thing.
Yeah.
All right, so the next chapter we go on. This is kind of a flashback chapter. It's Landers. For those who don't remember, Agent Phil Landers from part one, and he's out for a run, but he's kind of just recalling what had happened right before the arrest of Angel, and it gives you just kind of some insight into the pressure that was put on him to make an arrest, even if they didn't have hardly
right
any
person.
evidence. Yeah, even if it wasn't the right person, it was little to no evidence. It's
Yeah.
kind of the chapter is kind of a commentary on politics and what that plays into the judicial system a little bit. Dylan, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think it kind of shows a little bit of the relationship, at least at a small town level, between the criminal justice system and politics. Especially when you're talking about people like a DA or whoever is running for office. You know, people want to see that the law and order is being upheld, that people are being arrested for terrible crimes, and things are safe. And you know, I mean, I totally understand that, but at the same time, you kind of get sort of a window into how the criminal justice system works. Like once charges are filed, once an investigation really starts, and they start like zeroing in on people, it becomes a lot more about winning arrests, getting things moving, and a lot less about the truth and what actually happened, and figuring out, even in a case when somebody's innocent, whatever. But I felt like this chapter was a way for Dad to kind of, sort of give a little bit of a commentary on that, because and it's the truth, and you kind of understand why it works that way. It's what anybody in an elected office is incentivized to, in this particular situation, to make arrests regardless of the facts, regardless of what kind of case they're able to build. It's just, in this particular case, it was all about timing. So I don't know. I felt like Dad was using this case as kind of even a little bit to humanize Landers, not much, but mostly to just kind of give a window into the reality that is the political side of the small town criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I just real quick and felt like this was worth mentioning, and maybe it's not. You can always cut it out.
Sure.
But Caroline mentions, when they're talking about spending the money, a trip to the Cayman Islands, which it just was funny to me because this was like 10 years. He probably wrote this 10 years before we actually got to go to the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands were always a fantasy trip for Dad. And I don't know how it started. I don't know if it was John Grisham's The Firm, if that's what did it.
I think that's 100%.
You think that's what
exactly,
really
yes.
but I remember in high school, like I knew Dad, he wanted to go there
to go
so
to the
bad.
Caymans.
And so she mentions that in this book, which was almost 10 years. So our last trip that we took with Mom and Dad was in December of 2017. And she died in June of 2018. He died in November, and we went to the Cayman Islands.
Well,
So it was a great trip. Like, it was really cool. It was my whole family. It was Dylan and Katie. It was them. So we finally got to go. So it was just kind of like I couldn't believe that that was already so much of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
That was in the book.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah, that he had been thinking about it even for that long.
A lot of this chapter with Phil and going back through in the justice system, a lot of it centers around Deacon Baker, who's the DA.
He's the DA. He's based on Joe Crumley.
Okay. I was about to say, was he based on a real person?
Yeah, Joe Crumley.
Do you want to use that name?
Joe's been dead for a long time, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and it just it has a grudge against, like this whole thing with Angel and arresting Angel, it comes down to he had a grudge against Earlene's husband for a campaign contribution he made back in the day to his opponent.
Yeah.
And he said, hell, it's an election year. It'd be a real feather in my cap to put that glorified hooker out of business before August.
Yeah.
So it was like none of it was even about Angel at all.
Right. He saw an opportunity to kind of...
To just pettily get back at somebody for who, the guy's dead.
Right.
It's not even him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. So he is based on a real person. I figured.
Yeah. He was based on Joe Crumley, may he rest in peace, who was kind of an interesting character because there was a point early in Dad's law career when Dad and Joe actually got along really well. I'll never forget, as a kid, Joe was super into martial arts, and he had a martial arts studio that he owned downtown. And
really?
Dad took me there a couple times as a kid.
I remember his name.
Yeah, it was this weird sort of it was almost like platform 9 3/4 from Harry Potter. Like when you'd be walking down the road. I'm serious. There was this little glass door in downtown Johnson City, and that if you didn't know what it was, you would never see it in a million years.
Is that where you did karate?
Huh?
Is that where you took karate?
No. That wasn't where I took karate, but that was when I was younger. Dad just took me there a couple times, just randomly, but that was where you would have never seen it if you didn't know it was there. And then it would go up. You'd open this glass door. It would go up this little staircase, and you would open a door, and you'd look around, and you were in the middle of this freaking martial arts gym with all these like mirrors everywhere and these wood floors, and it was like this.
I'm having
what?
flashbacks. I feel
this
like
is
I
in
may
the
have
middle
gone
of
in this
downtown
building at
Johnson
some
City.
point too.
But yeah, he and Dad actually for a time or friends. And I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details because I feel like there was a point where Joe Crumley maybe wasn't at that point the district attorney. I think he got elected district attorney and everything changed. And the dynamic between he and Dad changed, obviously, because it had to, because in a
Right.
sense they became mortal enemies, you know?
Right.
But like I remember explicitly Dad taking me down there as a kid, being like, I don't know, probably maybe 10, 11 years old, you know, which is totally random. But anyway, yeah, it was totally based on a real person.
That's crazy.
Even the description is spot on. Exactly what this guy looked like.
Yeah, now that you say the
his
name, I
mannerisms,
remember
how he talked, everything.
him from when we were older, like being almost like a cursed name.
Yeah.
That it was a bad name.
Right. Like Voldemort, just to stay with the Harry Potter
Kind of,
theme.
you know.
Yeah.
But no, that's green. Voldemort. We're about to get to Voldemort in the next
we're
chapter.
about to get to him in chapter 15. So chapter 15, April 30th, 8:45 a.m. is Angel's arraignment. And this is a big chapter because this kind of sets off a series of events. This is the, not to bring up Domino a second time, but the domino that falls over that kind of sets the events of the rest of the chapter in motion, or the rest of the part 2 in motion.
Joe Crumlin can be Bellatrix.
There we go. Perfect. Let's just stay with the Harry Potter
know.
theme. So what happens at Angel's arraignment? It's very dramatic.
You want to go, Dylan? Or you want me to go?
Yeah, I can go.
Good.
So it kind of starts out, you know, so basically, obviously, this is a big case. So there's a lot of media there. Deacon Baker is there, who, like, and Judge Green kind of ribs him a little bit because he's just saying, "Oh, you decided to grace us with your presence." Which there's a lot of truth to this. In the criminal justice system, DAs don't come to everything, you know. They do just have it's incredibly coincidental. They just happen to show up for the cases that are big, for the cases where there are going to be cameras
The
around, where there's going to be media attention, you know.
Heavily covered cases.
So
yeah.
Well, and they almost
obviously
do
a
become
little-
more like managers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of truth to this, but Dad kind of running a little bit of a commentary on that, but also, so, you know, things get going. Dillard takes this opportunity to sort of kind of play that game in a sense. You know, there's media there's cameras there. He knows he has a chance. So what he does is he's kind of given an opportunity to speak. And he kind of goes into the truth of what Paul Tester Sr. was doing the night that he was murdered. And he gets into the nefarious dealings of what he was actually doing. And obviously it was very deliberate. It was no, we need to paint this character for what it was. Or for what he was in the media, and obviously potentially influencing a jury pool. This wasn't just some, you know, this wasn't an incredibly scrupled moral man. That this was a preacher who was very, very, very much a hypocrite. So anyway, that in and of itself, that's important, but that also kind of sets off another bomb where Dillard had actually known, I think, but Tester's son is there, and Tester's son is he is a religious fanatic, and maybe even more than that, he is a fanatical believer in his father. So in a way, when Dillard kind of takes that stand, publicly and actually announces to the public that kind of the reality of what his dad was engaging in and how dark it was. I mean, everything about it. He's in a strip club. He's just not a great human, not the human being he's supposed to be. That sets his son, Tester Jr., who was in the courtroom, has a massive outburst where he charges Angel and he charges Dillard, and he comes kind of like out of kind of the back sort of shadows of the room and crosses over into the main sort of space of the courtroom, and he ends up having to be detained and dragged out. And it's this very very emotionally charged, very intense scene where he's screaming, and he's fanatical, and he's screaming scripture, and there's all this crazy stuff that's going on. And yeah, I mean that's basically what I mean. Eventually he gets kind of subdued, but the message kind of gets across that he's he's pissed.
Yeah.
And that he hates Dillard and, not only Angel, but he actually zeroes in on Dillard too, like
for defending
blind hatred, not reasonable hatred.
Well, the word he used was scribe. You scribe. It
talking
was
about
almost
Dillard.
Like, Angel was the one who did the killing, but it was like Dillard, in a sense. I took it to mean in a sense that he was an accomplice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a super intense chapter. Super intense.
And obviously Angel's shaken by it.
Well, yes.
And she just is saying, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
She's crying. And we find out, too, John Tester Jr. is actually a sheriff, right? Did they tell us in that chapter?
So he's a chaplain
so
for
he's a chaplain
department.
for the sheriff's department in Cobb
Yeah.
County.
Gotcha.
So,
but he
that-
works
that's
with
a-
the
his
police,
daddy
which
got
is
him that job,
which
they
is
say at some point.
it's
but
important to note.
That would be like a weird,
Yes, he does work with
weird
police.
sort of position. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not law enforcement, definitely, but you kind of almost are.
Yeah. You're still like beholden to the, the system, I guess, of being in law enforcement, but you're not actually.
Well, you but for obvious reasons, you would definitely have connections in the law enforcement community. You know what I mean?
They're probably going to be on your side.
Yeah. Well, I've
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of my questions was, did your dad really hate it when the media was present? I literally could see how that would change things or make it more difficult.
I think he took advantage of it.
No,
but I'm sure sometimes you're kind of like
that.
I mean, no. Now, Dad actually thrived on the media a little bit. He wasn't the type that jumped in front of the cameras out in front of the courthouse and did a whole big interview. He more like the media in the courtroom. He would wear like colored contacts and stuff. Like he definitely had almost a reputation that he was
like he'd turn it on when the cameras
forming
were on.
And Dylan, you can probably say a little more about that than me. You probably remember better.
I agree completely. Dad didn't hate that at all because Dad knew how to use it to his advantage, which actually in a lot of ways for his law career ended up being his downfall later on, because he had been so public for so long. When shit hit the fan, it was super public. Like if he had been a nobody defense attorney for a long time and some bad things would happen, probably he'd gotten slapped on the wrist, and we'd have just kept going, and he'd have kept being kind of a small time defense attorney. But that's not how he clicked. But anyway, like sort of back to TV cameras, all that stuff. Dad always had this just innate sense of storytelling and understanding how a story was going to be spun. He had worked at the paper before that, at the Johnson City Press for years. So he had he had a really good understanding of how the paper would view things.
Right.
You know what I mean? How things, what the story would be, how the story
Right.
would be spun. So in a lot of ways, he could kind of get ahead of the narrative, and he could shape his own narrative, and he was exceptional at that.
Yeah.
He
He was quiet.
He
He's
used to be.
sneaky.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
He
just
was on the
like-
front page all the time.
Yeah.
For doing
Yeah.
random stuff as an attorney, because he just found ways to, and he saw
And it
that
brought him
in
a
a
ton of
lot of ways
business.
as
Yeah.
free publicity.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the Razzle Dazzle from Chicago.
Yeah.
The song. He
Get
knew how to do that with the
real
media, but still make it work for him.
Yeah.
But not look like Deacon Baker, who you know is there for the media, who is like
right. He just
only
hit it
there
a little
on the-
better.
yeah, he knew how to be kind of like
All right, so
methodical about it.
you
Now
wanna
I'm
hear
only
something
picturing
funny
your
that
dad as
kind of
Richard
in-
Gere.
You want to hear something that's kind of in the same vein
Yes.
that I just recently discovered. So this is going to be a super tangent, but this is the truth, and this is the most genius shit I've ever heard in my life. So Dad went through a period where he wanted to specialize in DUI, so
Yep.
he started calling himself the DUI guy.
Oh yeah.
The DUI guy, and he went to a couple seminars and he learned a lot about DUI law. And what he ended up doing was he had coasters printed that you could so he had all these coasters printed, and he took them to all the local bars.
Oh, that's brilliant.
and
and
he
matchbooks.
said, "Hey, use these coasters and then let your guests take them." So the thing with the coaster was, it was like it spelled out all your rights if you were going to be questioned and or arrested on suspicion of DUI. You could literally, the coaster said on it, just hand this to the police officer, let him read it, and you can say whatever it says on that, that's what I'm doing, arrest me now.
Wow.
Whatever. Do what you're going to do. So he just had this inherent sense of
And those I remember
ingenuity
those.
when it came to like marketing. He even had matches made
Yeah,
that he took to all the bars inside of 15 miles. He and Mom spent all this time like hauling these boxes of coasters and matches to all of these places, and it was a brilliant tactic.
He had commercials too that I wish we could find. Do you remember those
I found the what?
commercials that he made right at that time?
No. Oh,
Where
I
he's in the
forgot about
boxing
commercials.
ring and he had a belt at one point, and I just remember he wouldn't watch him because he couldn't watch himself, but he did
Yeah.
him because he was getting a lot of business then. But I just remember
God, I
one was in
forgot
a
about
fighting rink,
commercials.
and he at the end of it went, "I'm Scott Pratt and I'm ready for a fight," and he like put his fists up. I remember that. You know how like in Cincinnati you see
Blake
the hammer
Maislin?
on every single bus
Yes.
that goes by that
Yeah.
lawyer? Like it really is. It's razzle dazzle. It's put your
the
face
old
in
razzle
there.
dazzle,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting.
Well,
Yeah, it was funny.
yeah.
That was a fun face.
So then my other question from this chapter was Judge Leonard Green.
Yes. So
Real
that was one of the
person?
big ones.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Voldemort, he who shall
So,
not
this
be
is
named.
Voldemort in Dad's life.
Voldemort, yeah.
Yeah. So when I went through them, was kind of trying to like pick out the things that I thought related to his real life dads. One was right at the beginning of the chapter. He introduces it with talking about Tammy Lewis, who was a circuit court clerk.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about what she looks like, and she had like an even quicker tongue. And it just brought up like Dad was really close to all the workers in the court.
Mm.
He was like my mom. They both always knew everybody, every single worker. And the workers liked them.
Yeah.
They were very good at that. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't seem like a big deal. Like you'd be like, why would he make a point to do that other than just being like a decent person? But it always like when things went bad for Dad or if stuff happened, they would call him.
Yeah.
Like people in the courts, like Mom and Dad always made friends in places like that. They just had like almost a network. And Dad knew every single worker at those places and they loved him.
Yeah.
But so he introduces that, and then he introduces Leonard Green, and he says, "I thought he was pompous and effeminate. He thought I was a Neanderthal. We were both a little bit right," which was like exactly, I think, probably how their relationship started when they started hating each other. So it's,
Right.
do you want to say his name, Dylan? Who it's based off of, or no?
Well, let's leave that.
Okay.
Let's leave that alone.
Well,
for now.
people
But
that
yes,
know.
it's based on a very,
Very much based on a real, not
real
even just
person.
based, it is a real person. And even when it talks about Green also needling Deacon Baker, I put very normal for him to pick on both sides. Like, this judge, he was on top of a power pyramid. Like, he didn't really just pick on one side. He just loved to lord over everybody.
Yeah.
Like, he 100% would have done that to
Yeah.
a DA
Yeah.
as well as Dad. So I think that Dad, I remember being in the courtroom sometimes with him. Like, he kind of loved to watch him do it to the prosecution.
Yeah.
Or whoever Dad was against, because he would, Dad got crap from him all the time. It's true that Dad would call certain judges judge instead of Your Honor, because he
Oh.
knew it pissed him off. I think if he probably really respected a judge, he called him Your Honor.
No,
Is that-
not most of them. Most of them.
Most of them he called him judge. And he talks about how Dillard said it because he knew
Yeah.
but they can't really.
That was
say
very
anything.
no.
Yeah.
There's
That was the
that
thing
was
he
very
did.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very, very. That was very much something that just generally it was like you actually could call like a DA or something about there's something about the prosecution. I don't remember off the top of my head, but you could say general. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know exactly what it is, but that would be like the title that somebody who is super egotistical would prefer. Most judges very, very, very much prefer to be addressed as Your Honor. And Dad, that was like one of Dad's little small wins that he always called them judge. Because, I mean,
Well, and Dad
was
wasn't real.
Dad.
Dad wasn't a huge fan of authoritative figures over him anyway. So
Yeah.
that was just like one of those little
Yeah.
rebellions.
he
I
always
think.
had a problem with authority.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. That's like that
Um,
scene from A Few Good Men. The courtroom scene from A Few Good Men. But one of the best lines, nobody talks about it. The judge says, the court will address me as Your Honor. I'm most certain I've earned it. Because Jack Nicholson says, has this whole big line. And it's that just pinpoints the whole, their viewpoint of
yes.
wanting to be called that.
And I
Yeah.
guarantee that they probably said to
Right.
him a couple times, especially the judge that Green's based off of. They probably said something to him, and he just was like, "What are you gonna do?
Right.
Because what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
What are you not a judge?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a very real thing that Dad did, and just kind of really goes deeper into his issue he had with judges. And it wasn't all he did have a few judges that he really did respect for the most part, but in general he had a very contentious relationship with almost all of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was warranted. Some of it was that Dad just didn't really like authority figures.
Well, I feel
for the
like
most
it
part.
has to come with the territory of being a
True.
defense attorney, right? Because you're kind of you're defending not
Yeah.
great people.
Yeah.
So you're already kind of siding with the wrong person
Yeah.
to a
yeah,
certain
yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, I agree completely. The odds are stacked massively. I mean, that really, and I think it's a profession, not even just like a position that gets vilified in a lot of ways. The position of defense attorney, but realistically, you are the only thing standing between this massive grinding machine that is the government, that is these judges and these lawyers and this government investigative machine and everything that goes with it, and Ma and Pa Johnny. I live on Cottonwood Lane in the middle of Cott County. I mean, it really is. It is a noble position. It's also, in a lot of ways, a seedy position when you have to actually get into it. But
Mhm.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, somebody has to do it.
Somebody does, and you don't
no,
want people
somebody
to get
does have to do
railroaded.
it.
Yeah.
And
They do
I do
have
not
rights.
envy any of those
But-
human beings. It was insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
What other
That-
things did you have written down for this chapter? Anything?
Just a couple other things. Just about talks a lot about how the DA just hands out death notices and uses them as a bargaining chip. So another thing with Deacon Baker that he does that Dillard finds annoying. And then the thing Dylan already talked about it, Dillard pulling a stunt, and it even says, it's because Baker denies a speedy or like tries to fight against a speedy trial. So he was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, okay, you forced me to do this. And this is the whole media. He said, it was just a very
I like
good
that
tactic.
line that the actually it was from the judge. I think he said, God created the earth in 6 days, counselor. I think you can be ready for
in 90.
this trial
Yeah.
in 90.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's an actual line that one of
That
them
was
said,
pretty
because it
good.
would not surprise me.
It's a great line.
But Baker says he's trying to sensationalize this case for the media, and then Dillard says, not out loud, but says, he was right. I was.
Yeah.
That's exactly what, and I think that that's probably a tactic that Dad
Employed.
probably used
Yeah.
a lot. And then just the whole thing with John Tester Jr., that's a big plot in the book, but that's not something that actually
Right.
happened to Dad. So.
I figured that was dramatized.
Yeah.
So we go to the next chapter, chapter 16, which isn't numbered, but I'm numbering them for
Yeah.
my sake.
That's fine.
April 30th, 4 p.m. Erlene meets Joe Dillard at his office to find out what he found out in Discovery, right?
Mhm.
So this is kind of her getting caught up to speed.
And it's from her point of view.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
red Corvette, her red Corvette,
Mhm.
is going to be a sticking point.
Yes.
And that
well,
is
her
pointed
red
out.
Corvette that she has never admitted to possessing, and that they
Right.
have no record of her owning one. But she
Right.
never point blank says, "Oh, I didn't have one."
Right.
It's just kind
And
of
it kind of like the point of the chapter, we find she kind of figures out that the girl that works at her establishment
Mhm.
is the one who kind of gave her up
yeah,
and talked about the red Corvette in the first place and made mention
Yeah.
of the fact that she was driving it until this happened and then she wasn't driving it anymore,
hmm
which is obviously suspicious.
Well, and Erlene never directly answers anything in this chapter. She's like, "Well, what does that tell you?"
Yeah.
But she's the only one that said that, and I thought that this chapter mostly just kind of shows how smart and methodical Erlene is.
Yeah, she's not stupid, yeah.
No, she's not. And it even says one little thing that I think casts a lot of doubt on, is Angel actually innocent? Did Erlene not have anything to do with this? Is she says she says something about it's too bad Julie won't be around to testify.
Oh, yeah.
Like she mentions that in the chapter. So it's like you just kind of see that Erlene's taking care of this girl, and this girl seems so innocent, but there's definitely like something happened, and
Right.
there's a dark something with Erlene. Like she's
Well,
an intimidating
yeah,
woman.
well,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
I think at this point, obviously, it seems a lot like Arlene might have done this,
Mhm.
and I felt that way very much.
Yeah.
Reading it through, and
she says at the end
she
of
the thing that I take from Arlene in this is just how she is just so smooth in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this beautiful kind of marriage of like my grandmother's obviously the way that she talks
Wording,
and stuff,
yeah.
but it's a marriage of a lot of different things. But this character, she is just so. It's like the ultimate bad guy that you are totally rooting for.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, she's a great female, strong
Villain.
character. 'Cause
Like
she's
I am
yeah.
totally. I don't care if she did a lot of bad stuff. Like I want her to win. Like
Yeah.
she's awesome.
yeah,
She's
1000%.
the greatest thing ever.
Well, and she doesn't
You
need.
know what I
That's the
mean?
cool thing about what Dad did with her character is he made a cool, strong female character that's not just sweet and innocent. That's done things and
Yeah.
that you see is capable of some questionable behavior. But ultimately, like her husband's dead. She's not waiting on a man to save her.
Right.
She's doing all this herself.
yeah,
And ultimately, she loves Angel, and this man that died was obviously kind of a piece of crap. So it's like,
Sleazebag,
gee,
yeah.
are you saying that she should have like just killed him? No, but at the same time, you're like, well, maybe he deserved it.
Well, and I think too, like to your point, like it's from her point of view, so you get what she's thinking. You get the inner dialogue, and then you get what she's actually saying.
Yeah.
And like to your point, she answers every question with a question. You know,
Yeah.
and like never really answers. Like even the last part of the chapter, like he says, we have another problem. 2 hairs they found on Tester's shirt match Angel's DNA, and she's like, is that bad, sugar?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
She
And it's
says
like she
sugar and-
knows.
Well, I
She
swan.
knows what
That's
that
one of my
implies.
favorite things she
Yeah.
says. Well, I swan.
I know. So, but it ends like, which is funny because in a later chapter it says it's another chapter from her point of view where she says, like no man scares her, right?
Oh yeah,
But in
no,
this,
she's seen men at all.
Yes.
You know, owning a strip club, you'd see
yeah,
men at all.
so
of
she knows
their
how to manipulate
worst.
men. She
Yeah.
knows how to. And in this chapter at the end, it says that TBI man scared me to death, honey. I don't know what to say to him. And he says, from now on, Arlene, I'd suggest you just stick to the truth. Oh, I think they really set her up. I think the way he writes the chapter, which I think is fascinating, is like you're getting her inner monologue and you know what she's actually thinking, and then you're getting what she's actually saying, and it makes her look guilty.
Yeah. It also shows you in a lot of ways like the manipulative
Yes.
sort of like she's not anywhere near what she's putting out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she's a hell of a lot smarter than
But I always-
very
the
very
honey
very
pot
much.
and the
She-
sugars, yeah.
But I think that's
yeah,
like
she's putting a character out there.
I love like in movies and stuff when like the super smart female characters play dumb.
They play what they're supposed to.
Yeah,
be.
they prey on the expectations of those around them of what they're supposed to be
Right.
like, right? And that's like their
It's their biggest weapon.
yes.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you play on people's
No,
stereotypes.
Erlene
Yeah.
is massively that.
Yes.
Yeah, which I mean, she's not really fooling Phil Landers, but he also
She's
can't
almost
get
like a
in.
weaponized version of that in a lot of ways because she's the owner of a strip club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I
like-
also like though that even from her point of view, he keeps it in mystery what happened. Like he could be like, oh well, like while in her head, oh, so worried about him finding out that this happened, but it doesn't even touch what happened.
Right.
You just know that
Mm-hmm.
she is smart. She's saying it like it's kind of cool that he wrote it in that way that it's you don't know.
Right.
Like, you're like, well, she's acting real suspicious,
Yeah.
but
She's acting real weird.
who
I don't
knows?
know. Yeah, so I think that's a good chapter. It just kind of gives you some insight into Erlene. Kind of gives her
She's
some
just a cool-
dimension.
she's a cool character.
Yeah, I like her a lot. Next chapter, June 6th, 5:45 a.m. So we've skipped a whole month. Lots has happened. The two main things that happen in this chapter are that Joe is almost killed by a silver Dodge truck, and Lily's car and Caroline's diamond necklace are stolen in the middle of the night by his sister Sarah. So those are the two big plot movers in the chapter. So I gotta ask, did you really drive a 2001 maroon Chrysler Sebring?
So my first car, when I was 15, my dad came and got me out of school because that's what Dad did. It
Nice.
was very typical, like Christmas morning. Took me to. I did not have a license yet. It's very typical, Dad. Took me. I don't even remember where we went. It was obviously like a used car place, but I got a convertible Chrysler Sebring. It was not maroon. It was silver.
It was white.
White.
I think it
Convertible.
was white.
Look at you.
So I had a car before I had a license and could drive, and then that's the first car they took when everything went really bad when when his law license got taken away.
Yeah.
I don't even think I got to drive that car when I was 16. I think it may have gotten taken.
Yeah, it was kind of strange how it worked. But
'Cause
yeah,
so
that was the
and
first
then I
car that got
didn't get-
repossessed in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
not get my own car again after all that until he got me the powder blue Dodge Dart after I
Yep.
was out of college,
forget
and he
that.
started publishing his own books when I was 22 or
Nice.
23. So that I had a Sebring for a hot minute
Nice.
when I was 15 years old. And then I did not have a car for many, many years.
It's much cooler than my first car, which was a 97 Honda Accord. So
Honda Accord, you know,
Reliable.
Sure, it got you around.
Not cool. Reliable, but
Mine
not
was
cool.
really cool. It just, you know, that didn't have it for long.
Yeah, the license thing was kind of an issue.
Yeah, no, once we could get our permits, Dylan had a hardship license. He was driving us around at 14,
Oh, jeez.
which you're supposed to have very specific requirements to be able to get a hardship license, but because Dad was a lawyer and knew people, Dylan was just able to get one. Like,
Dad knew the guy at the top of the heap, and
so
got
Dylan
me a
and I were
hardship
driving around when he was
license
14.
basically when I was 14.
Nice.
And I was driving a 1990 Nissan 300ZX.
Look at you.
It was a freaking crotch rocket of a two-seater
For a
car, and it
14-year-old.
was awesome.
Yeah, that's insane.
But
He drove us to school, though. Dylan was reliable. We had fun in that car, but he never
oh
did
yeah,
anything
we had
stupid.
a lot of fun in that car. It was reliable, but we got rid of that car right before I turned 16 because there's a little loophole where if you're not 16, you don't have to list
Insurance.
on insurance, like who's driving what car. And then once I turned 16, it became, okay,
The
this
300Z
is the
would have been
driver
bad
of
to
this
insure.
car.
Yeah.
So all of a
They don't
sudden
like
I was
16-year-old
driving
boys
this
driving
like,
cars like that.
Oh, probably not. That's actually probably a good thing.
all of a sudden I was driving like this 1990 Nissan XE truck that
You're like, what in the heck?
squeaked everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway,
you really
that's neither here
you
nor
really
there.
went from like you downslided and then you had a truck with bullet holes in it. I mean,
yeah,
my
that
gosh.
one was a good truck, though. That was a good
Yeah.
one.
So lots of movement. We kind of this is the big chapter where Joe kind of decides that he's done helping Sarah.
Yeah.
His sister.
Which would be a huge decision for Dillard / like somebody in Dad's position with somebody you loved, like deciding you're no longer going to protect them.
right. He just kind of I think comes to the realization that he's actually not helping her.
Yeah. Well,
By-
and she took things from his people.
Right.
That would be a huge betrayal to Dad. Like
Yeah.
he so I said, like, the chapter starts with I like to watch sunrises on Sunday mornings, which to me that's like very much where Dad made Dillard into his ideal version of himself.
Yeah.
Dad would love to, and he sometimes was the man that woke up super early with the sunrise and would drink his coffee and do his stuff. It's what he wanted.
Don't we all wish we were that
Don't
person?
we? Yeah. So he's like, this is one of those instances where Dillard is his ideal
Yeah.
version, because Dad usually drank too much Saturday night to get up that
Right.
early on a Sunday morning.
Who's got time for that?
But that's just kind of one of those moments where you see that. And the same thing when he represents, this is the first time you see the silver truck kind of
Yes.
stalking them.
Yeah.
And this just is a big thing for Dillard's character / Dad's character, because if you come close to his family, then you're gonna start to get the animalistic side out of him. Like, Dad would never just like take that line down. And this
Right.
is kind of how this chapter or
Yeah.
this section of the book really speeds up, and because Dillard's the same way. If you
Right.
stalk not only me, but you come near my family and I start to feel helpless, I'm gonna do something.
Right.
Like, I'm not gonna allow that to happen. So I think that this chapter shows a lot about Dad / Dillard and his family core values. Like, not
Yeah.
only with the truck being there and kind of stalking his family and how he would react to that, but also with the Sarah thing. Like, Dad was big on, like, he bought Mom / me some really nice jewelry, and it was such a big thing for him.
Yeah.
And if his sister, which his sister's not like Sarah,
Right. Yes. You've
But,
established that. Yep.
if somebody were to steal that, like a necklace
Yeah.
that he really bought, and he says in the book it was the first expensive thing Caroline had ever owned,
Yeah.
but took that and, his daughter's car, that would have made Dad just be done with you.
Well, and he kind of sets it up in the first chapter of part 2 about with the money and like how Caroline was so excited and stuff, and like the wanting to provide and things like that.
Yeah.
That stuff really matters to him. Well, and it's kind of like this chapter starts off and his life is threatened because the truck tries to hit him. And then when he's walking back to the house, he recognizes that the car is stolen and he's like, what the heck? So it's almost like a 1-2 punch, right? Like it's like what, and it's coming from 2 different angles.
Yeah.
So
Well, and this never happened, but this would sadly, like the life that we led and with Dad, like this would be a day. Like this and this happened.
Yeah.
Like this would be a thing that would
yeah,
totally happen
Yeah.
to Dad. And we'd just be like, okay.
yeah,
That's
Well, we had a couple instances like when we were kids where we'd have like nasty voice messages left on
Mhm.
our or even threatening, like
Dad
super
notified our
threatening
school one time
messages left on
about
our
one of his
answering
clients.
machine.
Yeah, I remember that.
Uh,
I don't remember.
we never had anything like this per se where there was like a car
Where
where
they
we're like, oh
actually
my,
showed
all right,
up.
if you see this car, that's a person that is
Mhm.
here to screw with us per se. But
Dylan, I do remember
yeah.
Dad. Do you remember that when we were younger? I remember them notifying my school.
So I can't remember in this chapter, does he think that it might be John Tester Jr., or is that the next chapter?
He doesn't until the truck pulls out, and I think it kind of flashes. Like, it's not like, hey, that was him. It was
Yeah.
more like, I think, is this... Maybe he calls the investigator at the end of this.
He does. He calls 911. Well,
And
he
he says,
gets a
"Does
phone call
John
from the
Tester?"
police because they find Lily's
Yeah, yeah,
car
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
been wrecked. And that's how he finds out.
right.
And then he says, my sister stole some things. And he said, well, you better call 911.
Mhm.
And that's how he ends the chapter, is him calling 911.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
But the next chapter is when he finds out more about John Tester Jr. So he must have an inkling that it might be him. Because
Mhm.
doesn't he have like an aide or something look into?
Yeah, he does. He is a private
Diane
investigator.
something?
She's like a past detective or something.
What's her name? It's Diane something, right?
I did not write her name down.
Diane Fry.
Oh, Diane
Fry, old Diane Fry. Yeah,
Diane
no,
Fry, yeah.
I think he calls her at some point or just says that he wants her to see if he has a silver truck. He specifically says.
And she calls and says, yeah, he does.
yeah,
And she finds out some more information about him. That's where he
talks
kind
to
of
his aunt.
yeah, talks to his aunt that moved to Ocala. Gives you more of a background on who John Tester Jr. is. He was obsessed with his dad, like idolized him. Sat on the front row when he preached, all this stuff. But he doesn't have a criminal record. But
Yeah.
he's kind of starting to worry a little bit, right? That this guy is potentially stalking him, especially
Mhm.
after that run-in in the courtroom. That's why that scene is so important, because you're like, okay, this guy's kind of a nut job.
Mhm.
Like, and then the rest of the chapter is him confronting Sarah in jail
Mm-hmm.
about what she's done.
Yeah.
And
Well, they call him, say they have her in custody, and this would have been Dad 100%. Like he immediately goes to see her, and he's like, and he wasn't sad. Dad would not wait and try to process his feelings.
right,
If he was mad and felt like somebody like betrayed him or something, he would go when he was hot to
Yeah.
try to make sure that he like made them feel
yeah,
responsible.
yeah, for sure.
So that was a very Dad move. I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, but he
it's-
basically, I mean, in this chapter, he basically tells her, like, I'm not enabling you, so to speak.
Well, he also says that he's going to try to get them to hold her to like the highest possible.
He's trying
like,
to get her the
pissed.
highest sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, what, 12 years or something like that?
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
12
it's a
years.
long time.
Yeah, that's when she kind of melts. But
Yeah.
the saddest thing about that chapter is she says to him at the very end what she said to him in the scene where their uncle raped her. That Joey, you were supposed
Yes.
to protect me.
Yeah. Yeah. It ends with that same
Yeah.
kind of sticking that in his head. Like, how could you do that? The next chapter is, this chapter was so dirty because this is where Agent Landers, he finds out that Sarah's in prison.
Oh, yeah.
And he knows
Yeah.
that it's Dillard's sister, and so he tries to bribe her by moving her into Angel's cell block and asking if she'll snitch for him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the first time that those two storylines kind of converge in the book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've kind of been running parallel. Obviously, they got closer 2 chapters before with the silver truck and then her stealing the car and all that stuff. But you get kind of an insight into just the lengths that Phil Landers will go to kind of manipulate the situation. She declines.
Well, she laughs when he says his name
Right.
because she's heard Dillard talk about him.
Right.
And she specifically says that he'll like manipulate and not stay true to his word.
Right.
So pretty much, why would she do it?
Why would she do it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's another commentary, I think, like that one chapter was about the justice system. I think this one's a commentary on what they'll do to get the information they need.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah, in this specific instance, obviously, it's like the perfect jailhouse snitch, but it's also like the imperfect jailhouse snitch in a lot of. I mean,
Right.
She's Dillard's sister. You know what I
Right.
mean? She has based on the situation, she has all the reason in the world to want to set him on fire. Per se at this point, because he has finally given up on her and thrown her to the wolves. So, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. But there's the back and forth is funny, and it's cool how she's, still loyal at this point. But for him, it's it feels like a low blow a little bit. I mean, it was probably a smart move given the situation, but it feels like a low blow and feels like something that that character would do, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, it is funny, too, how this kind of weirdly parallels what actually happened to Dad when he lost his law license, too. Just in the snitching, like that the girl that gave Dad up, that started the snowball effect of what happened to him, did it to get her sentence reduced. Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of a similar
Right.
thing. It wasn't his sister, obviously, but he felt very
Right.
betrayed because he was trying to help this girl. So it kind of parallels that a little
Interesting.
bit, I think.
That's super interesting. So the next chapter is we're back to Erlene,
Oh, Merlin.
and she is blackmailing somebody,
Yes, she is.
a local
Old
businessman.
Virgil.
Old Virgil, and to doing a favor for her. Did she ever say in the chapter what the favor was? We don't find out,
Nope.
do we?
Nope, I don't think so.
Ooh.
Nope, she just says that
The mystery
he's,
box. What's the favor?
Who knows? But she just says that he's kind of hesitant until she really just convinces him.
No, she totally
what she
just like
wants.
she's like, yeah, I have all these tapes that make you look.
But I'm
Yeah.
not going to use. That's my
Right.
favorite. He's like, how could you do this? She's like, I'm not doing anything.
yeah,
I'm just going to give them to you if
Yeah.
you do what I want.
right, yeah, for sure. So Erlene's doing something shady. We don't know what. Well, we know she's blackmailing the guy, but we don't know for what purpose. Like what Virgil can do for her, basically. Next
He
chapter.
was such a sweetie.
Oh, Virgil, man. Poor Virgil.
I think that was the
And his
last
bow
line.
ties.
I
He
know.
was
She was
such
like
a
a
sweetie.
collection of bow ties
Yeah.
that she's collected. I'm like, what a weird.
Got a lot of
That's
bow
hilarious.
ties, yeah.
Okay, so the next chapter is we find out that Caroline is now being stalked by who they believe to be John Tester Jr. because it's the same silver pickup truck. And Joe Dillard attends the arraignment for one of his last court-appointed assignments and gets clever with the judge and the district attorney. So this is the one where Deacon Baker
Yes.
Yeah.
did not file the death,
The death
notice.
notice, yeah.
And
Right.
I love this because I don't know anything about the law or any of that little stuff, but I love a good little just a little loophole. I love a good little
It's a
loophole.
this a little back and forth.
Yeah. And I think it shows how, I'm assuming that's how your dad's brain worked.
It 100% was. And I like this chapter too because you see so much in these books like Dad's contentious relationship with judges, but I love that he adds a little comedy in, and I do think that there was like, it wasn't always just hate between him. Like they had little like back and forth,
Yeah.
like him and Ivan Glass in this one where
Well, like
Ivan's
the judge
He's, like,
in a lot of
amused.
sense is like, oh, I see what's going on.
Yeah, I love
here.
that,
And
yeah.
it's kind of like, laughing about it. You know what I mean? I think that was very much a part of it too, especially with Dad, because Dad was. I don't want to say he was loose cannon, but he was a freaking loose cannon, and so like
Yeah, he was.
nobody knew what to expect. Even like judges would enjoy watching what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that
Um,
they loved that Deacon didn't file that death notice
Right, 'cause
after
they
he's
probably
told the
didn't like
media
him.
Hers is
Yeah.
perfect.
over and over
Yeah.
again about it, and then for Dad to be like, "Well,
Well, and I
Cool,
think
I'm
too,
gonna
I
do
would
this.
assume, like, even if you don't like somebody in your profession, that there's still some level of respect for figuring out the loophole or like working the system.
well," and being a judge, you sit there, you see the same thing all day, every day,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Nobody's ever done this
He's
before."
like, well, this is interesting. We've never had this conundrum
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, because the judge ultimately says, "I'm gonna err on the side of caution."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like duly noted.
Yeah.
It does say
Dillard,
Judge Ivinglass is amused.
Those was some good lawyering, and you're probably gonna win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I do
Says
think
we'll
there's
see
a
what
li-
the
Yeah.
Supreme Court says.
Yeah, I do. I think there's like a little bit of that, like back and forth, where
Like
it's
a touche.
yeah, like all right, you got me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And then it ends with Lily's last dance recital. Did you really dance to a Christina Aguilera
Yeah,
song?
I'm okay. I did, and I actually did not know Dad ever saw that dance
Really?
until this. Like I was reading, I was like, "Oh, I guess he did watch that dance," and thought you know how we talked about like the last episode that you don't
always know what people
you don't
are
know
thinking.
what people
Yeah.
think or
Yeah.
what because they don't write it down,
Right.
and it was kind of one of those things where dance was always kind of a weird thing because it's what I did with my mom. And he was always doing stuff with Dylan. And, like, it's not that he wasn't supportive of my dancing. He was. But then dance took such a huge part of Mom's life and attention
Yeah.
away that sometimes it was a cause of
Like tension.
struggle and
Yeah.
tension between them. So I, a lot of the time, kind of felt like Dad almost resented dance to the point that, like, he didn't really always see me
Yeah.
doing dance. It was more about like he saw the thing that was
Right.
constantly taking Mom away.
Yeah.
Are you talking about when he cried at the end?
Yeah,
of the chapter?
the solo, which I actually did do that solo. I didn't wear white, but I did do that.
He
solo
remembered everything else.
to I'm okay. Well, that's a good thing to put in a book. Like
Yeah.
a white dress for this
Oh yeah, for
with
sure.
the rhinestones and whatever. Like I wore like a hobo looking dress that was like tie dyed.
Cody's like, I came out in a
It
trash
wasn't
bag.
really a great costume, honestly. We really didn't, break the bank on that costume. But no, it was kind of a cool thing to read because I struggled with that sometimes.
You made him cry a lot though. I feel like.
Not that I saw. I did later. Like he.
No,
could
you
admit it.
definitely did though. In dancing or in like singing too. Like,
Singing more
you
so.
would do things all the time.
Yeah, no, singing was one of the few things I knew I could. But singing, he loved to sing. Dance recital was always a hard time for him and Mom. Almost
Yeah.
every year they
No,
ended up
it
in a
was
lot of
difficult.
fights.
Yeah.
A lot of the time he didn't
It
come.
was like a
He would
sense of
not come 'cause
validation
they'd be in
for
such
sure.
a big fight.
Yeah.
So like some years, and I never really expressed how much that disappointed me. The
Yeah.
years that he didn't show up to recital because they were in a fight.
Right.
Because I wanted him to see me. But
Yeah.
I always knew it wasn't about me.
Right.
But that was hard
it's
to
still not
accept
fun,
when you're
yeah.
a younger,
Yeah.
a teenager. I just wanted it to be about me.
Yeah.
So no, it was a nice thing to read for
Yeah.
me because I struggled with that sometimes growing up. So
I am unfamiliar with this Christina Aguilera song, so
It's
tonight
not
I will
a-
go
it's
and
not- it's a
listen to
deep
it.
track.
It's a deep cut.
It's a deep cut of Christina Aguilera's. They didn't put it on the radio because it is about like child abuse when she was younger.
Yeah, it's
Wonder
not
why
really
we
for the
chose that.
masses.
Wonder who came up with that. But yeah, so that was real.
So which is interesting because that brings us kind of to the next chapter. So he visits another one of his death penalty clients, Maynard.
Maynard.
Man.
And Maynard's kind of accepting of his fate, and he's very, to your point, he's asking Joe why he does what he does.
Well, Maynard they hate each other at the beginning of this chapter and
Yeah.
have hated, but this guy is just like he is a psychopath.
Yeah.
And these people
I think
are real.
he's
Yeah.
He met these people. Like the other guy helping
Yeah.
Dillard's character out couldn't go see him anymore
Yeah.
because he was so disturbed
Yeah.
by this guy. So I mean, it's just these are the people.
And his one request is that he's been writing to this woman on the outside, and he just wants to make
Yeah.
sure she gets these letters.
Yes.
And he kind of,
Right.
Joe kind of agrees to make sure that these letters get passed
well,
on.
and this is when his view of the death penalty
Yes.
comes out, which you and I both wrote down.
Right.
Because I do think that's always been an interesting thing with me for Dad, even growing up, because I just, with Dad's personality and like his protectiveness, and like I know 100% if anybody ever raped me or hurt me or murdered me, Dad would kill them.
Right.
No questions asked. Like, no questions asked. He would happily sit in jail for the
Right.
rest of his life. So would Dylan. But so it just, I would think, like, growing up, Dad and I sometimes, and probably Dylan and Dad, when he was going through like some of his law things, we would like get in arguments. He would want me to get in arguments with him on purpose, not like arguments in a fighting way,
right.
but like debate.
Yeah.
So sometimes we would talk about the death penalty, and he'd like kind of push me about what I thought about it, and I always kind of struggled with it, and it always surprised me that he struggled with it.
Yeah.
Because I, just knowing Dad and how he is, like, black and white he is about just like violent people, and if
Yeah.
somebody ever hurt anybody he loved, I
Well,
honestly thought he'd be fine
I think
with
he
it.
said this in the book.
He did.
I think he said this in the book, but it was he struggled with the hypocrisy
Yeah.
Yep.
of, you know,
Yeah, I
a
literally
government telling its citizens
Yeah.
you can't kill anybody, and then
Yeah, the line I
we're-
wrote down,
we're
it says,
killing people.
he says, I just don't
You
think
know?
it's right for a government to pass laws telling its citizens they can't kill each other and then turn around and kill its citizens. It just seems hypocritical to me.
And that's what he thought.
Yeah.
He was against the death penalty.
I feel like we had a randomly, we have a lot of deep discussions at the office, and we had a discussion about capital punishment the other day and the death penalty. And
This is during your potluck dip session.
yes, we had it's very serious business, shaved ice. So we got on the topic, and I am also a very black and white person, very justice oriented. That's just how I'm bent. And I literally was like, yeah, I don't think I believe in the death penalty. And they were like, well, what? And I was like, I just don't. It feels very, I don't know that I would say hypocritical. I don't think that's I agree
It
with that.
is slightly, yeah,
It
but-
is, but that's not the reasoning I came to for why I didn't agree with it. So it was fascinating to me. I think I read this like right near around the time we had the discussion, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I feel like most people that you talk to are pro death penalty.
Yeah. No, it's just something he struggled with, and I get why. I've always struggled with it too, and I think, you know, I struggle to be black and white about anything. I am kind of black and white about that, but then I always think with any issue, if somebody murdered my children, like really, would I then be against the death penalty? I don't know.
Right.
Like, you don't know those people in that
Right.
situation. Like, but it's still, why is it the government? So I don't know. This isn't a discussion to like, why is it right or wrong?
Let's unpack this.
Yes,
No, I'm just
let's
kidding.
really get into this. No, but I did also, that was something about Dad that always, I respected that about him though, because he really did hold society to a higher standard. He always did. Like, it didn't mean that he wasn't going to kill somebody if they did something to somebody
Right,
he
just
loved, but
because-
he
yeah.
wasn't the government.
Right. Yeah, and I
So.
think that, I don't know, it
True.
says something for somebody who sees a lot of the worst in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
To still,
They still doesn't want him
to still
yeah.
hold that. And I think maybe it's because he sees some of the human, you know, I mean, he ends this chapter like talking about that guy, and he's like, yeah, why shouldn't he get to send those letters to that?
Yeah.
Like, it's the last thing he'll get to do. You know what I mean? Like,
He's already condemned.
right.
you
yeah.
know.
Why not?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
why
that
not?
I did think that was interesting. This is one of those ways where Dillard is and isn't Dad, but in a lot of ways he very much is.
It is. It's very tough. I think I understand. Like, yeah. I mean, I understand why people are for it. Like, I wouldn't.
totally do too.
Like, I'm like, yeah. No. If somebody, I think I would struggle with it. Like, I can say from a rational, logical point of view that I'm like, I'm not for it because of blah 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 blah. But if somebody killed somebody that I loved, yeah, I just struggle with that. I think.
Especially and not that it. I don't know that this really affects it, but especially if it was in just a gruesome, awful
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
You know, it just, it's neither here nor there.
Well,
but
it's weird how it's super subjective too.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost
It
like a
is.
case-by-case basis. Like, oh, you die,
Well, but
you
then where's
don't
the
die.
line?
But you're, like,
Right.
right on the edge.
Well, and that's my
But
big.
you
like,
don't quite die. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's my
I don't
big.
know subjectively, like, how do you quantify that?
Well, and that was my big argument, and I guess it speaks to like the hypocritical nature of it. But I'm like, when you impose the death penalty, you're effectively playing God.
Yeah.
And deciding whose life is worth saving and whose life is worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I just don't think that we're supposed to make that decision. Like, and
Well, the people that did the killing obviously did, but then that's why they're going
Right.
to jail for
Right.
the rest of their lives, or
Yeah.
whatever. But anyway,
And I get like there's a lot of like, if there's no threat of a death penalty, like it doesn't prevent people from committing crimes and like blah, blah, blah. Like I get all the arguments.
yeah,
But I think it's an interesting subject. I think it's interesting that your dad commented on it in the book as
well, it's just
Joe
one of the
Dillard.
things I loved about him is that he was black and white about so many things, but he was a complicated human. He really thought out things all the time. He was
Yeah.
constantly like trying to be
wrestling with what he thought
a
about
more.
things.
Yeah, he didn't just. It wasn't just I'm thinking this way and that's
Yeah.
the way I'm going to think and that's it.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so the end of part 2, I think the last 3
Or part
chapters.
2A.
Part 2A. The last 3 chapters kind of all go together because there's a big inciting incident that happens that kind of ends this. Was a natural end to the first part of part 2, and that is on his way back from visiting Maynard at the end of chapter 22. In chapter 23, he gets pushed off the road by the silver truck
Pushed him
coming
off a
back
bridge.
around, pushed him off into a lake. He escapes and makes it to a farmhouse where a kind old woman lets him in to make a phone call.
I love the way that she talks too, because
Grant?
this is so like
That's my
out in the
favorite
country.
That's my favorite chapter.
Because he 100% was like putting this scene probably on like Pickens Bridge Road, which is the road we used to live.
I know, but
Old
it was like
Booney.
the last line where she's talking about, well, you don't look like a hoodlum.
Yeah.
What
does he say his last line? He said it.
And then, like, I think the last line is, it must have been the tie.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably was the
And
tie.
that's like what gets him in.
The fact that he was wearing the tie is really what garnered him some
Yeah,
favor
he's like
to get
missing
into the
his
house.
shoes. He's like soaked, but he's in a suit.
Yeah. So he must not be that bad.
Yeah.
What'd she say? She's like, you drunk? Like, yeah. Like,
Why'd you drive
No,
into
ma'am,
the
I'm not
lake
drunk.
for?
Yeah, exactly. And so, obviously, I mean, it's a very dramatic chapter because he's trapped in the car. You don't know if he's going to make it.
Also, Caroline's voice is what wakes him up.
Yes.
He hears
oh,
her
yeah, 'cause he
telling
hits
him
his
to
head,
wake
so
up.
it
Yeah,
kinda
as the
it
truck
knocks him
goes over
out.
the bridge.
Yeah. And so, Caroline in his, mind is there waking him up, and he escapes and gets to the farmhouse where we meet the woman. And then the next chapter, he goes to the hospital and he meets with the detective that's assigned to the case, Sam Wiseman,
Who doesn't like him?
who doesn't like him. Yeah.
As is
That's a big.
tradition with the people.
Yeah, and he tries to he's basically, so this is kind of where the whole thing of John Tester Jr. being a chaplain for the sheriff's department comes into play because they're like, well, we don't like you because you don't defend us, and this guy is with us.
Right.
Yeah.
So why would we go
don't have
out
any
of our
proof.
way to help you? We don't
Yeah.
have any proof. And he's literally like, can't you just go look and see if the front of the truck is bashed in and has paint from my car on it? Like, which would be a totally normal thing to do.
Oh, and that's very much why Dillard takes it into his own hands, and Dad would have.
Yeah.
And
So in the next
Yeah.
chapter, he does take it into his own hands. And
Yeah.
what does he do?
Goes to his house. Well, he goes home first, and he tells Caroline what he's going to do, and she is unhappy.
I freaking love that scene.
So
Where he
Mom,
and Caroline are, like,
100%,
duking it
yeah,
out.
and she would have.
This
She would have
is
been like,
the
"I'm
most
going."
dad shit ever. He would have 100% done exactly
What happened, and Mom 100%
Yeah.
would have been like, "I'm going with you."
Yeah.
And Dad would have been like, "No, you're not.
Yeah. You just stay home.
You're not." And Mom wanted to be in the, or like, you just sitting at home. You don't want to sit at home and wait and
No,
wonder.
because you're just
You wanna
worried the whole
go.
time. Yeah, you just
Yeah.
want to be part of it.
Yeah, or you just, even if you're in danger, like at least you get to see if they're okay or not, or at least if they
Right.
go down, you go down too.
Well, and he
Like-
says too, like he's like, and don't call me because I don't want to be worried that the cell phone's gonna go off. So now she's worried and she can't get in touch with them. It's like, oh my gosh. But I literally thought the dialogue was so real that I was like, this has to have
I'm
been
sure
a
he
version
did-
of an argument that they
Yeah.
had.
So Dad would go off and do crazy things sometimes, and not exactly this, but he
Well, yeah.
took things into his own hands. Like if something happened, he was going to do recon or whatever. Like
Yeah.
he did. He was military trained. Like he did not like to feel out of control
Yeah.
of his life, and he was going to do something.
Yeah. I think it was really, really smart how he did it in the book. So he creates a distraction. He basically creates a
Then he take
Molotov cocktail
a
to some
bottle
degree.
of gasoline, a
A
water
bottle of
bottle
water
fills it
filled with gasoline
What does she
and
say? What does
matches.
Caroline? What are you gonna? She says something about the water bottle with the gasoline. She's like, "What are you gonna?"
Molotov
Throw-
cocktail. That's
Is
what,
that what she
yeah,
says? Oh.
like, yeah, and he's like, no, it's gonna be a distraction. But he really didn't have a game plan. It says when
No,
he's
it's
like
just
driving
like-
over there, he's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So he formulates this game plan when he's over there, and he basically is trying to lure him out of the house. That's the
Well,
big
and I
thing.
think that Dad was very much like he was that. He would have been able to just make those decisions and do. That's how his brain worked.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote this like
Yeah.
he was trained. You know, when he was in the military, he had those types of instinct. Like if I got in that situation, I'd be like, "Ding dong ditch."
I know.
What are we gonna do?
Yeah, he comes out. You're like, gotcha. Yeah, exactly. But he goes and it's 70 miles away, so he's got a lot of time to like really think this through. And he is hot.
Yeah.
Like he is livid.
Well, the guy did try to kill him.
And he gets there and he kind of sneaks around in the shadows. He parks like, at an apartment complex down the street so as to not tie his vehicle to the location. He's sneaking around in the shadows. He's just doing some recon. He's trying to figure out, like, is he home? What's he doing? Is he in the living room? Is he watching TV? It's really
And it
quiet.
doesn't almost seem like he is home at first.
Yeah, you don't
it's
think,
like,
you
oh,
don't
maybe
ever-
nobody's there.
Oh, you know what? I didn't think about that till just now, that the vehicle's not there. Because they make you feel like he's not home because his
Yeah.
truck isn't there, but maybe he's hidden it because he knows.
Because he hit another person.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know
Right.
that didn't even cross my mind. I clearly could not have written this book. So I'm like, that's genius.
You and me
So
both.
he tries to create a distraction. So he starts a fire in the back near his shed.
Yeah. He
With-
doesn't actually
with
set
the-
the shed on fire. I think he just,
Yeah.
lights a
he
little.
pulls some like kindling out
Yeah.
and like other things like that. But he lights the bottle of water filled with gasoline
His
on fire.
gasoline.
And then he calls the phone number that he memorized that he saw earlier that was John Tester Jr.'s.
Which was also smart.
Number. I know he's kind of like a spy. And so he hears the phone ringing inside from outside the house, and he kind of like hides by the house, and he's basically luring him out so that he can just bash him, with the giant walking stick that he brought with him.
Dad always had a giant walking stick.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did. It was a thing.
So he lures John Tester Jr. out. I love when he makes the phone call. He's like, "Your shed's on fire." Like it's a neighbor or something.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like he has like this, and it's a phone number obviously that he wouldn't recognize. It's from Caroline's phone because his phone's at the bottom of the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guy comes out and he just wallops him, just hardcore, just
Yeah,
gets him
from
like-
behind, yeah.
and then pins him down or chokes him. He chokes him and then pins him down.
Yeah.
And he just has the best line in the whole book. It says, "Consider me your living, breathing restraining order." It's such a great line. Like you're like, how terrified would you be?
Yeah.
If somebody at midnight just came, like, lured you out of your house, bashed you over with a walking stick, and then said that line. It is so badass.
And he didn't kill him. He could have.
No, I know.
He
He's like, I'm in a fit of rage. He's like, should I just kill him? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a good. It sets up this. I'm very excited to read the second part. Well, the rest of the book, but the second part of part 2 because I'm like, something just cracked inside of his brain. Like, and he even ends like that's the ending of the chapter. Like it's him driving back, and the line is, "Caroline was right." I said aloud, "You're as crazy as he is."
Yeah.
Where he kind of realizes, like, I maybe took this too far.
What was I gonna do
Like,
if things have gone differently?
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
And I had 70 miles to sort this out, and I still went through with it. And
Yeah.
so I think there's like we're seeing him like pushed to the brink of what he can handle.
Well, and Dad did not like to feel desperate, and I can just imagine in Dad's head if he really thought that there was a possibility that somebody outside of his control was really maybe going to come hurt me, come hurt Dylan, come hurt Mom.
Yeah.
These people that he can't protect 24/7.
Right.
That if he really felt that out of control and that somebody really might do that to them, he would do this.
Yeah.
100% he would. He might know it was a bad idea, but it would just be a, like, what else am I going to do? Like, I can't not do anything. So
well, I think I agree, because that's why this stuff rings so true, because Dad has been in a lot of very physical situations, obviously military, but even beyond that, he's been in frickin' bar fights and normal fights and just fights. Like, he was never scared of violence.
and he studied martial arts, like he knew.
No, in some small way, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but in some small way, he almost glorified it. Like, growing up, like, for me, like, violence wasn't a bad thing. Like,
well, not like he taught you to be abusive, but it was more like if somebody comes at you,
you hit him
you
back.
come back. Like, it wasn't like a Dylan go hit everybody.
Lay down.
Well,
the
yeah,
law,
you have to
know?
let them know
And-
you were not to be messed with.
Yeah.
And that was very much how I grew up. So I think it was, and I think that too is why this stuff reads so well, and why it is able to resonate so deeply with so many people, because it's true. Because Dad has actually, like, Scott Pratt, the human, has actually been in a lot of these situations. So, he's not creating these situations. He's not saying, okay, well, if my character is in this situation, how would he feel, and what badass thing would he say, blah, 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 blah.
What
It's
fight
not
moves
like
would
that.
he
It's
do?
like the actual human Dad, Scott Pratt, has been in these situations and knows how they go and knows how how fast things happen. Granted, he did drop a few, like, one-liners in there that were, as you said, pretty badass. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that in a lot of ways it makes it accessible, because he actually has been in those situations, and he can write about those situations in a way that makes it palatable for other people, where it's like, oh God, yeah, like, that's exactly what that would feel like, because he's been in those situations,
Well, it's like how we talked about that Dad, most authors write, and it's like almost a fantasy life of what could be and more dramatic, and Dad's very much, his life was more exciting. I don't know if that's a word, but dramatic, exciting. He went through these things.
Right.
Like, if anything, these are almost a
Yeah.
palatable version
everything
of things that he
wrote
went through.
was real. Like,
Yeah.
he had been in that. Not, I mean, maybe there were a few things here and there, but for the most part, everything that he wrote about, he had 100% literally experienced
Well, it's
in
interesting
some way,
too,
shape, or
because
form.
I think for somebody who's reading this book for the first time and doesn't know what happens at the end of it, it's interesting to see the trajectory of his character and the downward spiral of, you see him in the very first chapter of the book. He does not let his emotions get to him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't like the guy he's representing, but he keeps it in check.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he holds it together for a really long time. And I think for being a lawyer, you can't let your emotions dictate how you operate. And so what we're seeing happen is, instead of making decisions based on logic and reason, he's making decisions based on emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Just pure, raw emotion. Like, there is no...
Right.
Which
like,
is why
considering-
ultimately being a lawyer did not work out for Dad.
Right. And I think, but that's an interesting commentary on him as a person. And I think he has that moment. Like, that's what's so great about, like, he gets back in the car to drive back, and he has that moment of clarity where he's like, what the heck did I just do? You know what I mean? Where it's like, the brain shifted back on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting just to watch Joe Dillard as a character kind of, all of a sudden it's hitting a little too close to home, and that's why the emotional response is coming out. But I think it's very much an indication of what he's holding in. Right? It's all this stuff that he has to keep in check.
Yeah.
Always. Because you see it under the surface, right? You hear his thoughts about how he feels about these people that he has to represent. And you get this kind of like these little nuggets of like, he despises this, and then now he has an actual reason to be emotional about it. And he takes it, and it is like full blown.
Yeah.
Can't
stop it.
Yeah. And it's totally like, it's irrational, but you totally could see like, yeah,
but he does
that.
stay rational. Like, it's an irrational situation.
Right.
But he stays
he could have killed
the planning
him,
of it and the all of it.
Right.
Like, and that's kind of how Dad was. He was a very rational person, or irrationally irrational person. I'm not sure which one. But
I think
Well,
to Dylan, like what you were talking about, like people can see themselves in that situation and go, I mean, I wouldn't have the wherewithal to be like, okay, I'm going to hide in the trees. And then I'm going to but you could see the response feels very natural of like, yeah, you feel threatened. So what are you going to do about it? And there's like that whole, like, people are fight or flight. And he's totally fight.
he's a fight, yeah.
I'm a flight.
I'm
I'd be like,
probably-
I'm going to Mexico. You'll never find me. But
I'm going to be in the tree.
yeah. I'll be like, the ding dong ditch.
Yeah. But that would be me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think you're 100% spot on with all that. I mean, I think that he, he understood those mechanisms because he had experienced them, and he could articulate them in a way that made him feel so real. And people would be like, hell yeah, I'd have done the same thing. like hit that son of a bitch, put him to sleep, punch him in the face. You know what I mean? So
People in the South have said it like that.
but I don't know. I think that was super unique. I think that was really unique to, you try to compare Dad's books to other fiction. How many writers have the actual military experience that have lived the life that he lived, where honestly, as Kody and I and you have talked about before, like, realistically, his life was probably a hell of a lot crazier than in a lot of ways than what the books were, and so it really, I think there are a lot of incredible, just unbelievable writers out there, but it's like they have to gather a bunch of information, you know what I mean, and create a scenario that they've never actually been in.
So we end part 1 of part 2 with Joe
like
Dillard in a very precarious situation, which is a perfect setup for the rest of part 2, the second part of part 2. And I'm excited to dive in because I want to know what happens to Joe Dillard from here. I mean, he's crossed the line. He's intimidated.
He's gotten physical.
He's gotten
done
physical
stuff
with somebody that's in the
for.
case that he's, entangled with. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't feel like it can be good.
Yeah.
So
things probably aren't going to get better before.
Yeah, things aren't looking up for Joe.
For a while.
Yeah, for a while. So I'm very interested to see, and we'll be back with the next episode with part 2 of part 2.
Part 2.
And we'll go from there. Thanks for listening, guys.